When Claire moves back into her childhood home after her father's death, she's haunted by fragmented dreams of a boy locked in the basement. A boy with her brother's face, though her brother died when they were children. As the hallucinations grow more vivid and a hidden door is discovered behind the furnace, Claire begins to question everything she remembers about her family and herself. Claire didn't cry at the funeral. It wasn't grief she felt, but something colder, like the house had been waiting for her, and now it had her back. As the mourners faded, replaced by silence and the smell of old wood and dust, Claire stood in the entryway of the New Hampshire Colonial, staring up the staircase she once fell down when she was 6. The banister still had that jagged splinter near the base. Her father's recliner was in the same place, the leather cracked deeper now. Nothing had changed. That's what made her stomach turn. She moved through the house like a guest, trailing fingers along the walls, memories flashing like faulty projector reels. Her brother, Evan, running through the hallway in pajamas. Her mother screaming in the kitchen. The sound of something breaking. A plate, a bottle, a mind. The gaps between her memories felt too wide. Claire hadn't lived here in over 20 years. After Evan died, she was shipped off to an aunt in Connecticut. Her father never visited. No one talked about what happened. Not the funeral, not the accident, not the way her mother disappeared a week later. The official story was that Evan had drowned in the neighbor's pond, but Claire had never been able to picture it. What she could picture, more and more lately, was his face at the bottom of the basement stairs. The dreams had started again last month. Always the same. She's a child, barefoot, walking into the dark basement. The air is damp. The light bulb dangles from a chain but never turns on. Then a voice. Soft. Desperate. Claire, are you there? She wakes up gasping. Back in the house now, the basement door gives her pause. It groans open, heavy as a secret. Dust spirals in the stale air. She descends slowly, each step a breath held too long. The basement is cluttered, boxes, broken. Furniture and that old furnace humming like it remembers things. Something pulls at her, an instinct, not quite memory. Behind the furnace, a warped sheet of drywall. It looks newer than the rest of the house. She presses her palm to it. Hollow. That night she can't sleep. Every creak in the house sounds like footsteps. At 3:12 a.m. she hears crying. Faint. A child's. She jerks upright. It's coming from the basement. She rushes down, barefoot, heart in her throat. But the basement is empty. The crying stops the moment her foot hits the floor. She turns to go, but something new catches her eye. A small handprint. On the drywall. At a child's height. It wasn't there before. Claire backs away, trembling. Upstairs, the lights flicker. She remembers something her father once said in one of his rages, something she dismissed at the time. You keep digging in that brain of yours and you'll find bones. Claire turns off the basement light, but behind her in the dark, something moves. She runs. Claire didn't sleep the rest of the night. She sat in the living room with every lamp turned on, a fire poker clutched in her lap. The house groaned around her like it was stretching after a long sleep. By morning, she told herself it was a hallucination. Stress, lack of sleep, maybe a residual trauma response. She'd been having therapy off and on for years. Her last therapist mentioned something about dissociative amnesia, a kind of mental lockbox. Brains do that sometimes, he said. Seal the bad stuff away until you're strong enough to face it. She didn't feel strong now. When the sun rose, she forced herself to eat toast, drink black coffee, and go back down to the basement. The handprint was still there. She examined the wall more closely this time. The drywall was nailed into what looked like the original concrete foundation, and then she saw it. An edge. A thin seam around the right side, like a door had been covered. She tapped it again. Hollow. She needed tools. Out in the garage, her father's workbench was untouched, dust covered, but everything in its place, as if he never stopped waiting to fix something. She found a crowbar, a flashlight, and a hammer. Back in the basement, Her hand shook as she wedged the crowbar into the edge and pulled. The drywall cracked, groaned, then gave way with a gasp of stale air. Behind it, darkness. A small, narrow room. No windows. Just a concrete floor, exposed. Pipes above, and old children's drawings taped to the wall in brittle, yellowing paper. Stick figures, red crayon. One showed a little boy standing next to a tall man with no face. Claire stepped inside. The air smelled like mildew and something sour. She shined her flashlight around. In the corner, a mattress on the floor, a small chair, and a metal bowl. For water. It wasn't just a storage room. It was a cell. She turned and vomited on the floor. Back, upstairs, she sat in the kitchen with her hands shaking around a mug of tea she hadn't drunk. Her mind spun. Her father was a monster, had to be. Who else would build something like that? But why? And who was it for? Then she remembered the drawings. The red crayon. Evan used to draw like that. Obsessively. Sometimes he'd scribble so hard. The crayon snapped. She rushed back down, grabbed the drawings and flipped them over. On the back of one, scrawled in the same red, "I'm still here. Claire." She dropped it like it burned her. The doorbell rang. She froze. Nobody knew she was here. She hadn't told anyone she was staying at the house. The doorbell rang again, then knocking. She crept to the front window and peeked through the curtain. A man in his 30s stood on the porch, dressed in jeans and a bomber jacket. Dark hair, gaunt face, a large scar trailing down his neck. He was holding a photograph. He knocked once more, then called out, "I'm looking for Claire Manning. I think she used to live here." Her blood ran cold, because the photo he held was of her. As a child, Claire didn't open the door. She backed away from the window, crouched behind the couch like a hunted animal. Her breathing turned shallow, her skin clammy. The man outside waited another 30 seconds before walking back to his car, a beat-up Toyota with mismatched doors. She noted the license plate, Vermont plates. Then he drove off. She stayed there for a long time, staring at the photograph he'd dropped on the porch as he left. When she finally opened the door, she grabbed the photo and slammed it shut again. Was her, maybe 6 years old, in a blue dress she remembered hating. Her arm was slung around Evan's shoulder. They were both smiling, but something in her smile looked off. Strained. Forced. On the back, written in faded pencil, "Do you remember what you did?" Claire sat on the kitchen floor for an hour, staring at the wall. Her hands refused to let go of the photo. What had she done? That night she dreamed of the room again, but this time she was inside it. Not watching from the outside, but kneeling on the mattress. She was older, maybe 10. Evan sat in the corner, knees pulled to his chest, rocking gently. He looked wrong, his eyes too large, his wrists too thin. "Why did you stop coming?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. She reached for him, but her hand went through air. "I didn't stop," she whispered. "I don't remember." But Evan only tilted his head. "You left me here." She jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The next day, Claire did something she hadn't done in years. She drove to the town library. The place was barely functioning. Half the computers didn't work, and the lighting buzzed like flies trapped in jars. But the archives were intact. She asked for newspaper clippings from 1996, the year Evan died. The librarian raised a brow but didn't ask questions. Claire sat in the microfiche room for hours. There was a small article about Evan's death, a paragraph. Said he wandered off while playing and was found drowned the next day in a neighbor's pond. No photos, no mention of the search. She remembered none of it. Not the pond, not the search, not the funeral. She pulled yearbooks, 1995, 1996. Claire's third-grade class photo was there, but Evan wasn't listed anywhere. She asked the librarian for school records. Said she was researching her family history. The woman hesitated, then brought a dusty folder from the back. There was no enrollment record for Evan Manning, no student ID, nothing. Claire flipped through pages, heart pounding. Her brother. had never been officially registered at the school. He didn't exist in any public records, like he had never lived. But she remembered him. She remembered his face, his voice, his drawings, the way he laughed when they played under the porch with plastic army men. She remembered, unless those memories weren't hers, unless someone had given them to her. On the way back to the house, she stopped by the diner for coffee. She hadn't been there since childhood, but the waitress recognized her instantly. Claire Manning. Back from the dead, huh? Claire gave a polite laugh. I'm sorry, she said. Did you know my brother, Evan? The waitress paused. You mean your imaginary brother? Claire froze. Excuse me? I remember you used to talk to someone all the time, the woman said, filling a cup. At recess, in the booth here, even during Sunday pie night, always whispering to someone who wasn't there. People said it was your coping mechanism after your mom vanished. Claire stared at her. The floor felt like it tilted. He wasn't imaginary, she whispered. The waitress gave her a sad smile. Honey, you were an only child. Claire locked herself in the bathroom that night and stared into the mirror for hours. The lines around her eyes were deeper than she remembered. Her pupils dilated and stayed that way. She kept trying to talk herself down. This is a trauma spiral. This is stress. This is just your mind trying to protect itself. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She called her old therapist. Left a voicemail. She didn't even know what. She said, when she finally emerged, the house felt colder. The door to the basement was open again. She was sure she'd locked it. The drywall panel was gone, completely removed, not just pulled loose like before. The little room gaped open like a wound, and inside, the drawings were gone, all of them. In their place, on the wall, a new one, crayon, jagged, red again. It showed a little girl, her face blank, standing over a boy lying on the ground. Red pooled. Under him. Written above in blocky letters, she made me sleep. Claire backed away, stumbled up the stairs, nearly tripped. She locked herself in her bedroom and pushed the dresser in front of the door. The next day, the man returned. Same bomber jacket. Same scar. This time he didn't knock. He sat in the front yard, just out of reach, staring up at the house like he was waiting for it to speak. Claire watched from the upstairs window, then finally went outside. I don't know you, she said, arms crossed. You need to leave. He stood slowly, hands open. I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Dean Leary. I grew up 3 blocks from here. We were friends when we were kids. She narrowed her eyes. I don't remember you. I figured. He reached into his pocket, pulled out another photo. This one was of 3 kids. Claire, unmistakably, maybe age 7. Dean beside her. And a third boy, blurry. The boy's face was scratched out. I've been trying to find you. For years, Dean said. After what happened, after the social worker split us all up? What are you talking about? Dean blinked. Claire, you don't remember the group home? She felt something inside her twist. I lived here, she said, pointing. At the house. No, Dean said gently. You were placed here. After your mom vanished, the system shuffled us around, but you. He picked you. Said he was your uncle. No one checked. Claire stared. Who? Dean looked toward the house. Robert Manning, her father. Back inside, she found an old box in the attic. Her adoption papers, her social security card, hospital records. They'd always looked legit, but now every page felt suspect. There were no birth records, no fingerprints. The date of birth on one document didn't match the others, and scribbled in a child's handwriting on the inside of a coloring book. I'm not Claire. Claire sat on the floor, holding her head, trying to breathe. Everything she knew, her name, her memories, her family, was cracking apart like glass, under heat. Dean came back again that evening, sat on the porch steps beside her. They drank tea in silence. Eventually he spoke. You had dissociative identity disorder, he said softly. They said it was caused by early abuse. You made someone in your mind to carry it. Claire didn't speak. I think Evan wasn't your brother. I think he was you. Her cup slipped, spilled tea across her jeans. She didn't even flinch. "No," she whispered. "He was real. I remember him." Dean looked at her sadly. "Sometimes, remembering is the most dangerous thing." From the basement, a thump echoed through the floorboards. They both froze. Dean stood. "That's not your memory," he said. "But someone's still down there." Claire stood at the top of the basement stairs while Dean held the flashlight behind her. Neither of them wanted to be the first one down. The thump hadn't repeated, but the air was thick, humming, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She took the first step. Every creak of the old wood sounded like a scream in the silence. When they reached the bottom, the little room was still open, but something had changed. The mattress was gone. So was the metal bowl. In their place, a small wooden toy. A hand-carved soldier, arm snapped off, head scorched. Claire picked it up with trembling fingers. She remembered this, or she thought she did. Evan used to make these, said they protected him from the man upstairs, but now she wasn't sure which of them made it, or who the man upstairs really was. Dean moved to the far corner of the room where the concrete wall looked uneven. "There's something here," he said. They pushed aside the old chair and found a metal trapdoor set into the floor, rusted shut. Dean wedged the crowbar underneath and heaved. The door popped with a groan and released a waft of earth and decay. Below, darkness, a crawl space. Just a few feet high, dirt floor, wooden beams rotting overhead. But in the center, a pile of bones. Small, child-sized. Claire staggered back, hand over her mouth. Dean climbed in, shining the light closer. Jesus Christ. He reached in and pulled something from the pile, a rusted dog tag. The kind issued in juvenile detention centers in the 90s, stamped on it, subject, C. Manning, 042987. Claire collapsed to her knees. That was her birthday, her real one. They called the police anonymously. Dean insisted it had to be off the record, or they'd both be detained until morning. When the cruiser arrived, Claire stayed hidden across the street, watching from the shadows as officers entered the house. She whispered to Dean, "What if I killed him?" Dean looked at her. "Who?" "Evan." Dean hesitated. "Claire, I don't think Evan ever existed outside your mind, but I do think someone made you believe he did. Someone wanted to hide what really happened in this house. And maybe that someone wasn't just your father." She stared at the porch. The front door was wide open, and no one had opened it. Inside, one of the officers screamed. Another ran outside, radio blaring for backup. Claire's vision tunneled. She heard the words but couldn't process them. Human remains. Multiple. Buried under. She turned away. Her legs gave out. Dean caught her before she hit the ground. At the motel that night, Dean tried to help her piece together what little she could. "You were one of 9 kids placed with Robert Manning over 15 years. A few lasted weeks, some a year. Then they'd disappear. Every time he'd claim they'd run away." "Nobody looked twice," Claire whispered. "So who was I?" Dean looked down. "One of them. But you survived. Barely. And Evan?" Dean sighed. "Maybe Evan was the first, or the worst. Maybe he was real, but maybe he was what your mind did to survive. A friend, a brother, a shield." Claire lay back on the motel bed, staring at the ceiling. Her hands itched. She scratched at her skin until it bled. The dreams came again that night. She was back in the small room. The light bulb finally turned on. A boy sat in the corner. Not Evan. Her. She stared at herself. Thin, broken, maybe 8 years old. Covered in dirt. The child version of her looked up, eyes hollow. "You forgot," she said. "You promised you'd come back." And then the lights went out. Claire didn't speak for most of the next day. Dean drove them to the county archives while the house remained an active crime scene. The radio was full of the story now. Local man found dead. House harboring child remains. Possible decades-long abuse investigation reopened. The headlines were explosive, but none of them mentioned her. Yet, at the archives they found what they Weren't supposed to. Dean paid off a clerk with shaky morals to access sealed juvenile records. Most of it was redacted, whole paragraphs blacked out like the government had something to hide. But one folder, misfiled, unsealed, contained a transcript from a psychological evaluation. Patient, Claire Manning. Date, March 11, 1997. Evaluator. Dr. Alma Reyes. Dean read it out loud while Claire sat motionless beside him, staring at the table. Patient presence with fragmented memory, third-person recollection of abuse. Speaks often of an Evan, a protective figure, always present during incidents of stress. Evan is described in vivid detail, but no documentation of such a person exists. Diagnosis: dissociative identity disorder, formerly multiple personality disorder, developed as a response to prolonged trauma and isolation. Claire's throat burned. Another page detailed an incident in the group home, a broken mirror, blood on the walls. Claire, found in the closet, mumbling in a voice they described as distinctly altered, lower in pitch, referring to herself as we. Claire whispered, "He wasn't imaginary." Dean didn't answer. She turned to him. "He wasn't. He took the bad things for me. He remembered them so I didn't have to." Dean met her eyes, then said quietly, "Maybe that was the only way you survived." Back at the motel, Claire stood in the shower for an hour, watching the blood and dirt swirl down the drain. But it never felt like enough. Her skin still crawled. Not from what she remembered, but from what she couldn't. There were pieces, missing, sharp ones, like teeth behind a smile. At 3 a.m., she got up and began scribbling on napkins, receipts, anything she could find. Names, words, bits of images that came in flashes, a red chair, a locked cabinet, the smell of bleach, a scream, hers, someone else's, cut off mid-breath. She wrote until her hands cramped. Then a knock on the door. She froze. Dean was asleep. This wasn't him. Another knock. Slower, rhythmic. She opened. The door a crack. No one was there, but on the floor another drawing, red crayon. Stick figures again. This time it showed a girl standing alone, with 7 shadowy figures behind her, all crossed out, except one. Claire picked it up, hands trembling. On the back, "One of us got out, but not alone." The next morning, Dean got a call from the detective on the case. They found something buried behind the furnace, a locked trunk sealed in concrete. Inside, toys, journals, bones. One small, hand-stitched doll with EM. Sewn into the chest, Evan Manning. Claire wept without knowing why. The detective said something else, something that made her skin ice over. There were fingerprints inside the trunk, small ones, and one set, still fresh. They let Claire into the house one last time, escorted by a detective who watched her like she was a ticking bomb. She wasn't a suspect, not officially. Not yet, but the forensics team had confirmed it. The fresh fingerprints inside the trunk were hers. Claire stood in the basement, staring at the concrete slab where the trunk had been sealed. Dean waited at the top of the stairs, silent, respectful. Her body remembered what her mind wouldn't. She knelt beside the empty pit, closed her eyes, and let it come. The memory was jagged, like broken glass, but it slid back into place, cutting her as it settled. She was 8. He told her Evan wasn't real, that she had made him up, but she'd heard Evan screaming through the walls. Night after night, when she found the door, hidden behind the furnace, she pried it open with a screwdriver. Evan was inside, pale, weak, too scared to speak. He clung to her like she was air. She brought him food, water, stories, until the day her father found out. She begged him not to hurt Evan, so he hurt her instead. And then, the snap, not of bone, of mind. In the memory, she was standing at the top of the stairs with a hammer. He was yelling. Evan was crying. And then, silence. Her father at the bottom of the steps, head at the wrong angle, blood everywhere. She ran, not from guilt, but because Evan was still screaming, from inside her head. Claire gasped awake on the basement floor, skin cold with sweat. Dean helped her up. "I killed him," she said. "But not just him." She looked at the empty space behind the furnace. "I buried Evan too." Dean was quiet. "I think, when it happened, when my mind broke, I put Evan in a box and locked the door." He looked at her gently. "To survive." She shook her head. "Not just to survive. To forget. He took everything. The pain, the memories, the truth. I made him bear it all." She looked down at her hands. "And when he got too loud, I buried him again." That night, Claire returned to the motel and did what she hadn't done in decades. She drew, red crayon, like before. This time, a single figure. Whole, alone, no shadows. She wrote on the back, "You can rest now." She placed it beside the motel lamp and lay down, letting sleep take her like a tide. In the dream, the door opened. Evan stood in the little room, older now, tired, but smiling. "You found me," he said. She reached for him, and this time her hand didn't pass through. She held him and let him go. Weeks passed. The house was condemned. Dean returned to Vermont. The story vanished from the headlines, replaced by newer horrors. Claire stayed, not in the town, not in the house, but in the truth. She changed her name, started therapy again, intensive, immersive. Integration was slow, painful, but she stopped fighting it. Evan wasn't her brother. He was her. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone with that knowledge. Years later, Claire stood at a conference podium in Boston. Her name tag read, Dr. Claire Manning, Trauma Specialist. She opened her talk with a story about a house, a locked room, and a child who survived by forgetting. The audience leaned in, and for the first time, the story had an ending.